Deep within the human being, where words dissolve and only the echo of truth remains, lies a secret kept since time immemorial. A secret that belongs not to the learned or the powerful, but to those who have learned to look beyond the veil of illusion. It is the law that governs the destiny of men, the force that shapes reality from within every heart, the law of assumption. For too long, we have believed that the world shapes us, that circumstances are the invisible threads that guide our path. We have been taught to fear the uncertain, to see chance as the whim of a destiny we cannot control. But those who have walked the path of knowledge know that this belief is a shadow that hides the true light. Everything we see around us is merely a reflection of what we carry within us. Life is not a river that carries us aimlessly. It is a mirror that reflects back the image of our own assumptions. Every thought we hold in the depths of our being becomes the potter of our existence, giving shape and substance to what we call reality. It's not enough to simply wish or repeat empty affirmations. The law of assumption responds not to empty words, but to the certainty of the soul. It's necessary to feel, live, and breathe the truth of what we want to be, as if it were already manifested. When we embrace the consciousness of what we desire within ourselves, the entire universe aligns to give it form in the visible world. Think of the pilgrim crossing the desert. If in his heart he believes the sun is his enemy, and the sand exists only to smother his spirit, then every step will be a struggle, every breath of wind a curse. But if deep within he embraces the certainty that the sun is his guide and the sand his bed of rest, then the desert ceases to be a punishment and becomes an ally that propels him toward his destiny. This is the case with everything in life. You are not a victim of circumstances, but their creator. Your destiny is not written in the stars, but in the whispers of your own soul. Every certainty that dwells within you, every assumption you hold deep within, materializes as the cornerstone of your reality. Those who have discovered this power know that it is not an unattainable mystery or a secret reserved for a select few. It is within reach of all who dare to look within themselves and take responsibility for their own destiny. It is not chance that guides their steps, but the conviction that they already are what they wish to be. If you long for love, love it first within. If you seek abundance, feel abundant in every beat of your heart. If you desire peace, cultivate it within yourself like one who patiently waters the tree that will bear fruit in the future. It is not the world that will tell you who you are. It is you who tells the world what it should reflect. The law of assumption isn't magic, but its effect is as powerful as if it were. It's the compass that has guided great dreamers, poets, wise men, and brave men. And now it lies before you, waiting for you to claim it as your own. Knowledge is not found in books, temples, or the speeches of men. Truth dwells in your heart, in the quietest corner of your soul, where certainty needs no proof, and faith is the only voice that resonates. Today, at this moment, you have the power to change your story. Don't look to the past with regret, or to the future with fear. Look within yourself and accept with all your being that you are already what you long to be. And then, like a river that finds its course, the universe will respond with the one certainty that never fails. What you believe with your soul becomes your destiny. Chapter 1. The Law Never Forgotten. Walter had traveled through countless lands searching for answers no one could give him. He was no ordinary explorer. He wasn't looking for riches or conquests, but for the deepest meaning of existence. He had heard of an ancient temple where the sages of old had left writings that held the key to understanding reality. With a heart full of hope and feet covered in dust, he arrived at the ruins of that dwelling forgotten by time. The walls, now consumed by moss and the wind, seemed to whisper stories of ancient times. Among the shadows of the ruined pillars, His eyes found a scroll, intact, despite the weight of centuries. With trembling hands, he unrolled it, and when the evening light touched the golden characters inscribed upon it, his spirit knew he had found what he had long sought. As within, so without. What you hold as truth in your heart becomes the very fabric of the world. It wasn't the first time Walter had heard similar words, but never before had they resonated so clearly within his soul. He felt that the law before him wasn't new. It had been present since the beginning of time, waiting to be remembered. He sat on a rock, letting his mind wander through the mysteries of that statement. If reality was a reflection of his inner self, then he was not a spectator of events, but their creator. Every joy, every sadness, every obstacle he encountered was nothing more than an echo of his own beliefs. Many people live believing that destiny is written in the stars, that circumstances determine their path. But those who understand the law of assumption know that the outside world is only a mirror of the inner world. It's not chance that directs their lives, but the beliefs they hold deep within them. In a remote village, beyond the green hills, lived Margarita, a woman who had lost much in her life. Her home was a silent refuge, where every corner spoke of memories. Loneliness had become her only companion. But one afternoon, as she watched the sun dye the sky in shades of gold and purple, she realized something. Sadness was not a sentence imposed by the universe, but a story she herself repeated within herself. From that day on, Margarita decided to live as if joy already dwelt in her heart. She wouldn't wait for happiness to arrive at her door. She would invite it in with every daily action. She tended her garden like someone who loves the beauty of life, wrote in her diary like someone who finds joy in reflection, and smiled at her neighbors with the certainty that her world was filled with harmony. As the days passed, something began to change. People who had previously greeted her coldly began to stop and share kind words. Birds she had never noticed before landed on her window with joyful chirping. Even the air around her seemed lighter, more vibrant. Margarita hadn't altered the outside world. She had transformed the way she saw it, and in response, the world had changed for her. That's the essence of the law of assumption. It's not about asking the universe, but about assuming within ourselves the truth of what we desire. Assumption isn't a simple thought, but a state of being. The deepest knowledge lies not in books or the words of the wise, but in the silent voice that speaks to us from within. Those who learn to listen to it discover that life is a dance between what they believe and what they live. Sacred practice. Find a quiet moment at dawn or dusk. If you wish, light a candle to symbolize the awakening of your consciousness. Reflect on the beliefs that have guided your life until now. Write 3 assumptions you hold about yourself and the world. Transform them into affirmative statements in the present tense, as if they were already a reality. Repeat them every day, not as distant wishes, but as truths that resonate deep within you. Remember, the universe doesn't respond to empty words, but to the certainty that dwells in your soul. What you hold in your heart will manifest on your path, like the river that, without a doubt, always finds its way to the sea. In a forgotten corner of the city, where the streets seemed to whisper the secrets of time, a man named Sebastian wandered aimlessly. He wasn't an unhappy man, but deep in his heart, he felt that life had given him less than he deserved. Walking down a cobblestone street, he stopped in front of an old bookstore, the kind of place that seemed created to hold mysteries on its shelves. As he crossed the threshold, the scent of aged paper and ink enveloped him. His hands ran over the spines of the books until one, bound in worn leather, seemed to call to him. He picked it up cautiously, feeling a strange warmth in his hands. When he opened it, the words began to dance across the pages, not like something printed, but as if emerging directly from within his soul. Those pages revealed a secret Sebastian had felt deep within him, but had never been able to name. Everything he believed about his life was unfolding without his knowledge. He was not a victim of luck or chance, but the unconscious architect of his own destiny. Every thought that crossed his mind wasn't a mere fleeting whisper, but a command given to the universe. The words he spoke upon waking, the stories he told himself, the fears he nurtured, and the dreams he postponed, all of these wove the tapestry of his existence. He remembered the times he'd said, "I never have enough money," and how his wallet always seemed empty when he needed it most. He reminisced about the days when he'd convinced himself that true love would never come to him, and how fate responded by keeping him alone. He understood that the universe didn't distinguish between what he wanted and what he feared. It simply responded to what he believed most. At that moment, she felt the urge to change her story. She closed the book with determination and left the bookstore with renewed purpose. She decided that, from that moment on, every word she spoke would be a seed of what she wanted to harvest. So, it started with something simple. Every day, I'm closer to the life I want. And although at first it seemed like a lie, over time it became an unquestionable truth. With each affirmation, her reality adjusted to reflect what she had accepted as true deep down. Years later, when he told his story, many asked him what his greatest learning experience had been, and he always answered the same. We don't create reality with our actions, but with our beliefs. Life doesn't give us what we ask for, but what we're convinced we deserve. Exercise. Sit quietly and listen to the words you use every day to define your life. Are they words of abundance or scarcity? Of love or loneliness? Write 3 sentences that describe how you see the world, and then replace them with new affirmations that reflect the life you want to live. Not as a wish, but as a truth that already exists, and that you are only learning to recognize. Because in the end, the greatest power lies not in the circumstances, but in the story we choose to tell ourselves about them. On a lonely hilltop, where the wind sang ancient melodies through the trees, a woman named Amelia lived in apparent calm. Her days passed amid the aroma of hot tea and the crackling of wood in the fireplace. Yet, even in the deepest stillness, her mind was never silent. As she swept the wooden floor, subtle thoughts would emerge. It's going to rain today, and without fail, the sky would turn gray. No one will call me, and her phone would remain motionless. At first, she thought they were intuitions, but over time she realized it wasn't the universe speaking to her, but her own internal dialogue shaping her world. Discovering this filled her not with fear, but with power. She understood that if life responded precisely to her thoughts, then she had the ability to direct her destiny with intention. It wasn't enough to desire change. She had to embody it in her words and in her innermost certainty. You too participate in this silent exchange, in every thought that passes through you. There are no empty words, no harmless assumptions. What you hold within you manifests itself as faithfully as a reflection in water. Every "I am" you whisper is a declaration to the universe. It doesn't describe who you are, it defines it. It doesn't reflect what you see, it creates it. In a modest tailor's shop, where the afternoon light bathed the bolts of fabric, a man named Daniel worked in silence, but his thoughts were constant. As he painstakingly sewed, his mind wove doubts. "My effort isn't enough," he thought as he pulled at the thread. "I'll never achieve success," he sighed as he cut the fabric. One day, a client praised his work with words that resonated far beyond his workshop. "Your skill is unique. You can feel the soul in every stitch." And something inside Daniel sparked. If others could see his value, why couldn't he see it himself? From that day on, her dialogue changed. With every stitch, she repeated, "My work is appreciated." With each new garment, she affirmed, "Abundance flows to me." Soon, her tailoring business came alive. Orders increased, clients returned, and the certainty of her own worth became her new reality. The conversation you have with yourself isn't an unimportant murmur. It's the ink with which you write your destiny. As Daniel learned, when you change your internal narrative, life has no choice but to follow the new script. Practice. For the next 24 hours, become the observer of your thoughts. Don't let any phrase go unnoticed. How do you speak to yourself? Do your words reflect the future you desire, or reinforce the chains you want to break? Every time you notice a limiting thought, don't reject it. Thank it for showing you where you need to heal. Then, replace it with an affirmation that represents your highest truth. This isn't an exercise in naive optimism. It's the sacred act of remembering who you are and the power that lies within your inner voice. For in the end, it's not fate that dictates your story, but the words you choose to tell it. In an ancient market, where the echoes of time whispered among the stalls, Isabel arranged her mirrors with an almost ritualistic dedication. Every dawn, her hands caressed the glass, polishing each surface until it gleamed like the still water of a calm lake. However, as the days passed, something unusual began to reveal itself before her eyes. The reflections not only showed the physical appearance of those who looked into them, but also projected the essence of what they believed about themselves. A prosperous merchant who felt inwardly unworthy saw himself dressed in rags, while a humble baker who knew her true worth saw herself enveloped in a golden light. Isabel, astonished, then understood a knowledge that ancient sages had whispered: life is nothing more than a faithful reflection of what we carry within us. You inhabit a universe that, like an infinity mirror, accurately reflects the image of your deepest thoughts and beliefs. If you move through life convinced of scarcity, the mirror of reality will show you evidence of lack at every turn. If, on the other hand, you move with the certainty of abundance, the same mirror will reveal unsuspected paths and unexpected opportunities. This reflective quality of the world is why two people can face the same situation and achieve completely different results. It's not the external event that determines your experience, but the internal assumption with which you receive it. Diego, a stonemason in a town dominated by coldness and harsh judgment, spent his days reflecting the frowns of those around him. Every day he walked the same streets, responding to harsh stares with equally hostile gestures. However, one day he discovered the mirror principle and decided to put it to the test. Instead of assuming disdain in others, he began to see kindness waiting to be acknowledged. Where before he perceived indifference, he now assumed a spark of warmth waited beneath the surface. Little by little, as if the entire town were responding to a new, invisible language, cold glances turned into friendly greetings, and harshness gave way to camaraderie. Diego's story demonstrates that when you transform the image you hold within yourself, the world's reflection has no choice but to adapt to it. This is not a simple exercise in optimism. It is the manifestation of an eternal and immutable law. The Mirror Ritual. Close your eyes. Breathe deeply. Feel the beat of your own heart, that sacred drum that marks the rhythm of your existence. In this moment, the entire universe stops to listen to you. Find a quiet corner, a space where the voice of the world fades away and only your own remains. There, with a pencil in hand and a blank sheet of paper, write honestly. What situations repeat themselves in your life? Do you always find yourself mistrustful of love? Do opportunities seem to slip through your fingers? Does the recognition you seek never come? Don't judge what he writes. Just observe it, like a traveler who finds ancient scrolls and tries to decipher their meaning. Because that's exactly what you're doing, unearthing the hidden inscriptions that have guided your destiny until now. Now, deep within each repetition, search for the invisible thread that unites them. What is the secret belief that has brought them together? Perhaps, without realizing it, you assume that love always hurts, or that abundance is only for a few, or that life is an endless struggle. But today, here, decide to write a new story. Choose a different assumption, one that reflects not fear, but the light within you. It's not enough for it to be positive. It must resonate with the truth of who you truly are. If you previously thought, "Love eludes me," write firmly, "Love flows to me with sweetness and certainty." If you believed, "Nothing turns out the way I expect," decree, "Every experience brings me closer to my purpose." Every morning, look in the mirror. Look into your eyes as if you were looking into the soul of an old friend. Tell yourself this new truth, not as a simple affirmation, but as a reminder of what has always been yours. Don't repeat the words, hoping they'll come true. Speak them with the certainty that they already are. Because the outside world is only a reflection of your inner universe. And when that reflection changes within you, life has no choice but to adjust to your heart's vision. The sacred practice. In a remote corner of the vast land, where the sky meets the mountains and the valleys whisper their secrets, Clara used to retreat each evening to the small refuge she had built with her own hands. The serenity of that place was her temple, and in it, she found the profound silence that allowed her to hear the voice of her soul. She knew that within her lay the key to transforming her life. But to find it, she had to pay attention to the invisible traces left by her own history. One afternoon, as the sun began its descent over the plain, Clara sat at an old wooden desk, with a simple notebook and pencil in front of her. The golden light streaming through the window illuminated the blank pages, waiting to be filled. Calmly, Clara began to reflect on the repetitive situations that plagued her life. Her mind traveled to the encounters with people, to the circumstances she seemed to relive again and again, as if they were echoes of a past that never quite faded. She remembered Javier, a childhood friend who always returned to her life only to leave, leaving her with an emptiness in her heart. She also remembered her job, where she often found herself stuck in a rut, believing she would never be able to escape, as if the doors of destiny were closed to her. Every time she thought about her relationships, her work, the paths she had taken, there was one constant: the feeling that something was limiting her, that she was always repeating the same cycle. Clara realized there was an underlying assumption, an invisible pattern that had been weaving her life without her noticing. The belief that she didn't deserve the best, that she should settle for whatever came, without question. Suddenly, in that moment of introspection, Clara felt a profound revelation. The answer lay not in changing others or the circumstances around her, but in changing the way she saw herself. She understood that life is nothing more than a mirror that reflects the assumptions and beliefs we harbor in our hearts. If she wanted her reality to be different, she had to first change the internal assumption that told her she didn't deserve more, that she wasn't enough, that she should settle for less. She took up her pencil with determination and wrote in her notebook a new assumption, an affirmation filled with light and power. I deserve a full life, rich in love, peace, and abundance. She wrote the words over and over again, feeling the truth in each one, visualizing in her mind the future she wanted to build. She did it with faith, with the certainty that her external world could only reflect what she already lived within. Every morning, Clara rose before the sun, and in front of the mirror in her refuge, she said aloud her new assumption: I am a person capable of receiving all the good that life has to offer. I am open to receiving the love that is due to me. I live in a world of abundance and opportunity. At first, the words seemed strange to her, like a distant dream, but as she repeated them, they began to resonate in her heart. Each day, with greater conviction, she felt that her words were not mere wishes, but the absolute truth of her being. She knew the key lay not in struggle, nor in forced effort. The key lay in assuming with certainty that her life was already on the path she had decided on, that the universe responded not to what she desired, but to what she believed. Clara soon noticed small changes around her. Her work began to take on a new shine, as if opportunities came more easily. The relationships in her life deepened, and the love she felt for herself began to be reflected in the people around her. She understood that life doesn't change because the outside world does, but because you decide deep down that you are ready to receive what you deserve. The sacred practice. Every morning, when you wake up, perform a small ritual in front of the mirror. Look into your eyes, for there lies the truth that cannot be seen with the physical eyes, but with the eyes of the soul. In that moment, observe the light shining within you and declare firmly and without hesitation, "I am a person worthy of all the good that life has to offer." Don't say it as a wish, but as a certainty, as if it were already a reality. Repeat this over and over again, feeling how those words change the energy around you. Imagine each word you say taking shape, growing in power and light, and know that as you follow this path, the universe will respond to your declaration. Every word you say is an act of creation, a step toward the life you have chosen to live. It's not about forcing things or expecting everything to happen immediately. It's about fully trusting that, by changing your internal assumptions, the world will begin to reflect what you've believed, without a doubt. Life doesn't give you what you ask for, but what it assumes with the certainty of a wise being. Let your internal dialogue be a fertile ground for the transformation you desire. And in time, you will see how reality begins to coincide with your new truth. From desire to reality. In a small town, where time seemed to stand still, surrounded by mountains that watched everything from their eternal majesty, Viviana spent her days in a modest room, illuminated by the golden light of the sunset. Sitting at her worn wooden table, she delicately held her needle, and with each stitch in the fabric, she wove not only patterns of thread, but dreams, hopes, and desires that took shape in her heart. Although her craft was simple, Viviana knew something profound that many still didn't understand. True creation happens not only with the hands, but also with the soul. Every desire that sprouts in your heart, like a seed planted in your being, is actually a sacred compass pointing your way. These desires are not accidents, nor mere temptations that arise on a whim. They are signs from the universe, hints of what already exists in the unseen realms, waiting for you to recognize it and attract it into your life. The desires we harbor deep within us are not empty dreams, but manifestations of what we are destined to experience. You only need to have faith to see them take shape. As Viviana worked with her fabrics and needles, she was not only creating clothes, but also a future filled with beauty, success, and recognition. With each stitch, she felt the softness of prosperity between her fingers, and in her mind, she visualized herself in an elegant workshop, surrounded by admiration and appreciation for her art. In her thoughts, she lived like the successful woman she longed to be, and that inner vision began to reflect in her life. She knew the secret was not to wait for things to happen, but to live as if they had already happened, as if the dream had already been fulfilled. And with each day, she got a little closer to the manifestation of that dream. Carlos, a man once trapped in the shadows of despair, knew this truth out of necessity. His business, once plagued by debt and losses, showed no signs of prospering. However, one day, in the stillness of his soul, he realized that constant struggle was getting him nowhere. Instead of clinging to his fear and lack, he began to live like the successful man he longed to be. He began to walk differently, with a firm and confident stride, speaking with the certainty of someone who had already achieved his goals. The decisions he made were no longer those dictated by the fear of lack, but by the awareness of abundance. Carlos stopped waiting for prosperity. He began to live from a place of abundance, as if he already owned everything he'd ever dreamed of. As he did, his outer world began to transform. Opportunities that had previously eluded him now came to him with ease. Doors that had once been closed now opened effortlessly. The universe responded to his inner certainty, and what had once been only a wish began to materialize, as if by magic. Practice to sleep in the desired state. Before going to bed each night, make your bed a sacred place where the reality of your dreams blends with that of your being. Close your eyes and enter the scene of your wish fulfilled. It is not just a thought. It is an experience lived in your mind and heart. Feel the satisfaction of accomplishment, the joy of fulfillment, the profound peace of knowing that your wish has already been fulfilled, that everything you have longed for is present in your life. Sleep with that certainty, allowing those feelings to permeate deeply into your being, into the depths of your subconscious. This act, so simple and so profound, aligns your conscious mind with your inner being and prepares the fertile ground for the manifestation of your dreams. By sleeping in this awareness that what you desire is already a reality, you plant powerful seeds in the garden of your life, seeds that, by universal law, will grow and flourish over time. Speak as if you were already outside. In the farthest corner of an ancient library, surrounded by dusty shelves, Valeria found a book that seemed centuries old. The leather covering it was so worn that its edges crumbled upon contact, but the book's essence was unmistakable, its energy vibrant and mysterious. When Valeria ran her fingers along the book's spine, something unusual happened. The words inside the tome weren't printed on paper, but rather floated, waiting to be activated by the will of whoever touched it. And so it was. With a profound sense that something momentous was about to happen, she began to read the first few verses. This book didn't respond to empty words or whispers filled with doubt. It only responded to absolute certainty, to firm declarations born from the heart. Somehow, the universe, the vast and mysterious field of creation, responds not to desires that spring from faint hope, but to words that emanate from unshakable conviction, from unchanging faith. When we speak with the certainty of one who knows what they say will become true, the very fabric of reality begins to yield to our will. We often wonder how miracles can happen. The answer is simpler than we think. Speaking as if it already exists. Speaking not from need or desire, but from the certainty that everything we've dreamed of has already come to pass in our lives. It is here, in this space of absolute certainty, that the universe bows before us, transforming our reality in profound and definitive ways. Consider Samuel, a simple man who, after years of struggle, found his life on the brink of bankruptcy. His business, a small tailor shop that had been his life's dream, was no longer prospering. But one day, Samuel discovered the power of the spoken word, of unwavering affirmation. In front of his mirror, every morning, he proclaimed with absolute certainty and without a second's hesitation, "My shop flourishes. My hands create art. Success manifests itself naturally. My customers find what they're looking for here." At first, the words floated in the air, changing nothing in his surroundings. Nothing seemed different, and life went on, just as it had before. However, Samuel was not discouraged. He understood that the secret was not in waiting, but in firmly declaring that what he desired had already been done. He didn't beg. He didn't ask. He simply affirmed as if his fate were already sealed, as if the stars themselves had agreed to align with his inner truth. And, as if by magic, circumstances began to transform. A wealthy client entered his shop, not by chance, but as a reflection of Samuel's words. Rumors about the quality of his work began to spread, and soon his previously empty and silent tailor shop was filled with visitors who appreciated the dedication to his craft. Samuel had spoken with the authority of one who knows his word is law, and the universe had no choice but to respond. Verbal script practice. Every day, set aside a moment to speak aloud, a declaration about your life, just as it should be. Sit in a quiet place, in front of a mirror, or in a peaceful space, and declare with complete certainty what you already know is yours. Use only a minute, but use that minute with the full force of your conviction, as if you were affirming the deepest and simplest truth in the universe. Speak without hesitation, as if you were describing something that has already happened, something that already exists. Don't think in terms of possibilities or wait for things to change. Speak from the power of creation, as one who knows that their words are a command that reality must obey. Let your voice resonate in your being and in the universe, transforming your consciousness and reshaping the reality that surrounds you. You're not simply saying words. You're shaping the future with the same certainty the ancients knew the sun would rise each morning. Your words are divine, and their power has the ability to shape the world around you. Use your voice as a sacred instrument, knowing that, in every statement, you are weaving the destiny you've chosen for yourself. Internal conversations, external changes. In a distant corner, where the paths intertwined like threads of an invisible tapestry, lived Teresa, a woman whose words were as sharp as thorns. Every day, she sat in front of her house's window, watching the shadows slipping across the walls and the figures passing by on the street. Her mind, caught up in the rush of life, wove stories of judgment and criticism, poisoning her own heart with thoughts that didn't belong to her. One afternoon, as her eyes rested on the reflection of her soul in the fogged-up glass, something inside her began to change. Looking at herself, she realized the bitterness pouring from her lips, the words she mercilessly spoke to others. But what truly shocked her was the revelation that emerged with the clarity of dawn. Not only was she judging others, but she was also speaking to herself in that same way. Then a gentle voice, like a breeze caressing the leaves, whispered inside her, "Your internal dialogue is the beacon that lights your path. It's not just what you say to others, but what you say to yourself that shapes your reality." At that moment, Teresa understood something profound. The universe doesn't respond only to the words you speak, but to the energy that accompanies them, the feelings that emanate from them, the assumptions they carry with them. For years, she had walked through life as if condemned to an existence of lack. But now, with the eyes of her heart open, she understood that she could rewrite her story. And so, she began to whisper new words, words filled with compassion, with love toward herself. "I am enough. Love flows to me in every way. Peace is my birthright." At first, her words sounded empty, as if they couldn't pierce the silence of her doubts. But over time, Teresa noticed a change. The world, which had once seemed rigid and distant, began to soften. Neighbors who hadn't even stopped to look at her began to smile at her. Opportunities for connection emerged like flowers opening in the sun. It was as if the universe, hearing her exchange of conversation, had begun to respond with a symphony of possibilities. But the most fascinating thing of all was that by changing what she told herself, Teresa was also changing the world around her. The universe, like a mirror, reflects what we carry inside. And what Teresa discovered in that reflection was an ancient truth, a spiritual law she had forgotten. Everything we think, everything we believe, and, above all, everything we tell ourselves creates our reality. In a nearby workshop, where the gentle ticking of clocks marked the tranquility of the days, lived Eduardo, a man whose skill in repairing the pieces of time was known to all. However, in his heart, he carried a much deeper broken mechanism, the distance that existed between him and his brother. Years of unspoken words, of harbored resentments, had woven a chasm that seemed impossible to cross. But something was about to change. In the stillness of his workshop, surrounded by clocks marking the passing hours, Eduardo began to speak softly, as if his brother were there, with him, in that silent space. "Brother, I understand now. What separates us is only a reflection of what we believe about ourselves. We can heal. Day after day, Eduardo rewrote his story in his mind, replacing the old grievances with new words of understanding and compassion. And over time, the words he had spoken in his mind began to come alive. A letter arrived at his workshop, in his brother's handwriting, a letter that brought with it the hope of a reunion. What Eduardo discovered, like Teresa, is that the internal conversations we have deep within us are the seeds of our experiences. If we change what we tell ourselves, what we think and believe, the outside world will transform to reflect that new truth. Words are magic. Every thought is a spark, every word a flame. And what we think, what we say to ourselves, has the power to ignite fires that change our lives. Sow words of love, of peace, of abundance. Because the garden that grows from those seeds will be a reflection of your most authentic self. Change your internal dialogue, and the world will align with your new truth. And so, you will not only transform your life, but you will change the course of the days to come, creating a path filled with light and infinite possibilities. The path of internal reconciliation. Find a corner of calm in your life, a place where the whispers of the world don't interrupt the silent dance of your soul. Make this space your sacred refuge, where you can be at complete peace with yourself, free from the noise that often obscures the depths of your being. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and feel the whisper of your breath. Let each inhalation connect you more to the now, and each exhalation dissolve the tensions in your body. In that moment of silence, choose a relationship that needs healing, one that may have been marked by misunderstandings or unhealed wounds. It could be a relationship with someone close, or even with yourself. It doesn't matter who it is. What matters is the genuine desire to heal. In your mind, visualize that person in front of you, but don't see them as the figure from yesterday, the one who was trapped in confusion or pain. In your inner vision, allow this person to present themselves in all their humanity, their vulnerability, and their essential being. Feel, with every fiber of your being, that there are no judgments or expectations. There is only the deep desire for understanding. Now, speak to her in your mind, with the words your heart has kept silent, but also with the warmth your arms yearn to offer. Feel each word become a bridge connecting your souls. It's not about what has been said or done before, but about what you now want to create. Let your inner dialogue be filled with compassion, as if your souls both understood each other without barriers. Feel how harmony, which once seemed distant, begins to weave between you, like a symphony of peace and love. Imagine how old grudges and misunderstandings dissipate, how respect and mutual understanding are restored. This is the beginning of a new cycle, one in which wounds are healed with the medicine of inner reconciliation. Dedicate 5 minutes a day, for 7 days, to this sacred dialogue. Let each day be a step closer to the transformation of your heart. May your inner voice become the channel through which reconciliation flows, building bridges where there were once chasms. This exercise is not only about healing an external relationship, but also about healing the place within you that once carried the weight of resentment or misunderstanding. By healing internally, the external relationship inevitably begins to transform. Remember, the words you speak to your heart are the ones that will create the reality you desire. Reconciliation begins within, and ultimately, the love cultivated in your soul will sprout outward, touching everything in your path. Self-image is destiny. In a peaceful corner of the earth, where the gentle breeze seemed to lull the soul, lived Ruth. In this small town, where murmurs dispersed like a mist settling on the skin, Ruth was a figure who glided through the streets as if fleeing from something invisible. Every morning, as she passed by shop windows, she looked away from her reflection, as if the encounter might hurt her. There was a forgotten story within her, a glow that waited in the shadows of her being, waiting to be reclaimed. But what Ruth still didn't understand was that her true self wasn't something alien to her. It was there, waiting for her own eyes to recognize it. "Your self-concept isn't simply a set of ideas," said the inner voice that was beginning to rise. "It is the foundation upon which everything you are manifests. It is the essence of your very life. Every experience, every conversation, every opportunity is born from this sacred plane of identity." Ruth didn't change what she saw in her reflection, nor did she alter her appearance. Instead, she began to see what she already was: a radiant woman, full of light, a truth hidden beneath the shadows of doubt. She did this not as a desperate wish, but as an act of reclaiming what was hers. At first, no one noticed the change. Outsiders couldn't see what she had begun to discover within. But soon, there was a light that couldn't be ignored, a vibration emanating from her being that drew others to her. Strangers began to linger in her presence, as if something in her energy was calling them closer. Ruth, effortlessly, without having to speak louder, began to shine, because the light that already existed within her had found its place in the world. This change wasn't an effort at external transformation, but rather a subtle, internal reconfiguration. Ruth stopped being the woman she thought she was, and became the woman she had always been. The divine truth that dwelled within her emerged like a flower opening to the sun. When we take control of our self-image, there's no need to change anything external. The world, in its infinite response, begins to align with our true essence. Your self-image is the key that unlocks the doors to your destiny. It's not what you wish to be, but what you know you are that creates your reality. The world can only reflect this inner truth. Consciousness manifests itself, as light does when it finds an open space. Franklin, in his workshop filled with dust and dashed hopes, lived under the shadow of past failures. The label of failure weighed on him like a coat he'd worn for years, but one morning, he decided to take it off. It wasn't an attempt to aspire to success, but an alignment with his true nature. He began to walk differently, to think differently, to live as if success was already within his essence. Thus, not in a forced way, but from a place of authenticity, his revolutionary invention began to come to life. Success came not from his desperate effort, but from the perfect synchronization with the essence of who he had already begun to be. Self-image. Reset. Now take a moment to close your eyes and journey into your highest self. Imagine yourself as the most fulfilled version of who you are. How do you behave? How do you speak? How do you think? How do you interact with the world? For the next 48 hours, live it. Not as an exercise in imagination, but as a return to your true self. That forgotten essence that dwells deep within your heart. Every action, every word, every thought must be born from that inner truth. You are not pretending. You are remembering who you already are. The outside world can only reflect the image you carry within you. This is the sacred contract between consciousness and creation. As you align with your highest self, watch reality begin to transform. Circumstances and opportunities will adjust to reflect your inner expansion, because, in the vastness of creation, the only truth that matters is the one within your being. Remember, what you think about yourself not only defines who you are, but what you can become. The eyes of the invisible. In a small village nestled in the mountains, where the fog seemed to embrace the houses like a protective blanket, lived Teresa, a woman who had never seen sunlight in her entire life. From the day she was born, her sight had been deprived of that gift so many took for granted. But, paradoxically, she saw beyond what her physical eyes could capture. And not only did she see what others couldn't, but she also deeply understood what the world tried to hide from others. Every morning, she sat in her garden, surrounded by the silence of nature. and her words flowed like a calm river, describing in detail and precision everything that would happen that day. The townspeople would often look at her from their windows, amazed by her foresight, by the calm that emanated from her being. To some, she was an enigma. To others, a mystery to be solved. They said Teresa had a gift, a special ability, something that made her different. But Teresa knew it was nothing more than a universal truth, a profound insight that everyone had, but few dared to acknowledge. Remember, my dear, true vision is not in what your physical eyes can grasp, but in what is within you. That is the light that guides you, the light that allows you to see the invisible. She used to tell herself whenever someone asked her how she could make such predictions. Teresa understood that the universe didn't need external proof to manifest our desires. All it needed was for us to trust the inner light that burns within our being, the light that shapes our reality. True vision is not about seeing the world as it is, but about perceiving what it could be. The doors closed before us are only a reflection of our limitations. But if we learn to see with our hearts, we will realize that beyond those doors lies a path waiting to be discovered. Just as stars guide navigators in the darkness, inner vision illuminates the path of our lives. In a distant corner of town lived a man named Andres, a writer who spent most of his days surrounded by papers, his words scattered throughout every corner of his humble home. His friends and neighbors used to call him a dreamer, a man who spent his time writing stories that would never be published. But Andres didn't see himself that way. He knew, with the certainty of a soul who has found its purpose, that his words would change the world. He didn't do it for recognition or for fame, but because he felt his writings already existed, that they had already touched millions of people, even if they hadn't yet left his desk. Every morning, he sat in front of his typewriter, surrounded by the echo of his thoughts. He didn't write with the hope of one day being read. He wrote with the certainty that his words were already being read, that his work was already changing lives. Andres wasn't a man who waited for something to happen. He acted as if he were already living his destiny, as if the future were already a palpable reality, waiting to be manifested. The world saw Andres as an ordinary man, yet he knew his life was woven with invisible threads, that every word he wrote, every thought he had, was already making a difference in the universe. Success for him wasn't something he waited to achieve, but something he already possessed deep within himself. He knew that creation doesn't begin in the outside world, but deep within oneself, in that sacred connection with the divine that we all possess, even if many don't recognize it. When Andres's first book was finally published, it was received like a whisper of something already known. It wasn't a revelation to readers, but rather a confirmation of what they already knew deep down. Andres's words had already been with them. They already knew them, just waiting for them to materialize in the form of a book. And when its success arrived, it wasn't a surprise to him, for he had already experienced it in his heart long before his first book was published. Creation begins in the invisible, in the realm of the unseen. The seeds of our dreams and desires already exist in the spiritual plane, waiting to be manifested in the material world. And when we recognize its presence, when we see with the eyes of the soul, the universe has no choice but to reflect it in our lives. Inner vision is not just a tool for creation. It is the bridge between the soul and reality. Candle meditation. Take a moment to find a quiet place where you can be at peace. Light a candle in the dark and sit in front of it, allowing its soft light to illuminate the space around you. Close your eyes and visualize your desire not as something far away, but as a present reality. Imagine that you have already achieved it, that it is already part of your life. Now, with the certainty that everything you desire is already within you, say with a firm and clear voice, "I see it. I feel it. It's done." Don't say this as a plea to the universe. but as an affirmation of what already exists in the invisible realm. Because deep within you, in the depths of your being, your desire is already fulfilled. Creation follows certainty, and when you align yourself with what you already know, the universe begins to manifest what your heart has seen. The light you carry within you is what will guide your path. You don't need proof. You don't need to wait, because in the invisible, what you desire is already happening. You only have to open the eyes of your soul to see it. Rewrite history. In the center of a vibrant, noisy city, where the echoes of the crowds never seemed to cease, lived Elena, a woman whose heart beat to the rhythm of the sewing needles and the fabrics wrapped around her fingers. Every night, after the bustle of the day faded, she sat at her antique wooden desk, surrounded by patterns and fabric swatches. But it wasn't the art of fashion that defined her. Her true passion lay in the pages of her leather-bound journal, where, each night, she rewrote the stories of her life. "Remember, my dear," she would tell herself as she ran her pen over the blank pages, "you have a greater power than simply accepting what was. You have the sacred ability to reshape the emotional imprint of your past." Elena knew that true transformation was not born from the passive acceptance of what had been, but from the recognition of her ability to transform the stories that had defined her. Just as a painter can cover a worn canvas with new colors, her consciousness had the power to rewrite the memories that no longer served her highest purpose. The past, she believed, no longer existed on the physical plane, but as a distant shadow in her mind, a story she told herself over and over again. And if she changed that story, she would also change the vibration that sustained her present. "It's not about denying what was," he reflected. "It's a form of spiritual alchemy, transforming the lead of painful experiences into the gold of deep understanding." The process wasn't easy, but Elena knew the magic lay in perseverance, in the courage to face her story and rewrite it with love and wisdom. Every pain, every disappointment contained a seed of transformation, waiting to grow into something new, something liberating. In a remote corner of the town lived a man named Mario. His life had been marked by war, by memories of a past filled with suffering and silences impossible to forget. Every dawn, before the sun illuminated the city, Mario would delve into his inner self, searching his heart for the broken pieces that still left scars. He would close his eyes and return to the house where he had grown up, where the lack of words and the harshness of his family had left him empty and confused. But in his meditation, he began to change history. In place of the screams, he placed gentle laughter. In place of the cold silences, he added warm hugs and the gentle guidance of those who loved him. Little by little, the years of suffering dissolved, as if the waters of a turbulent river were washing away the burden he had carried for so long. Thus, the soldier returning from the war finally found peace in his own heart. The story he had carried, that heavy burden, began to transform into a story of healing. Elena knew something Mario didn't yet fully understand. The universe made no distinction between what had happened on the physical plane and what we chose to imprint deeply in our consciousness. The act of reviewing a memory wasn't a simple mental game. It was a powerful action that utilized the same creative energy that had given rise to the universe. Every time she rewrote her past, she wasn't simply changing the words of a story. She was transforming the energy that governed her life, shaping new possibilities for her future. And then, at the end of each night, when silence filled their small house and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Elena closed her journal and felt lighter, freer. She knew that every memory she had transformed, every pain she had transmuted, was a seed planted in her soul. A seed that would blossom into the purest version of herself. Rewriting meditation. Take a moment to sit in a quiet place, in a space where you can be calm. Close your eyes and take your mind back to the past. to those memories that still weigh on you, to those moments that have left their mark on you. Now, visualize those memories, but this time, instead of what happened, imagine what would have happened if you had acted with more compassion, with more love, with more light. Every time you relive those moments, begin to change the story. Imagine that the words spoken were softer, that the hugs were warmer, that closed doors opened with ease. Allow yourself to feel the release that comes with forgiveness, the peace that comes when you transform what is painful into something that strengthens you. Rewrite that story with a heart full of love, knowing that by doing so, you are freeing your present from the chains of the past. Because in the end, what defines your life is not what happened to you, but how you choose to remember it. And what you remember can be a powerful tool in shaping your future. Every time you do this, you'll be taking a step closer to freedom. And the story you've been telling yourself about yourself will begin to be written not with pain, but with hope, love, and the certainty that the best is yet to come. Sacred practice of memory transformation. In a corner of the soul where the traces of the past continue to resonate, there are memories that still throb with the echo of pain. Perhaps it's an unspoken word, a missed glance, an opportunity that never materialized. These memories are etched in our minds like invisible scars. But wisdom lies in recognizing that we can change their essence. If you decide to heal, if you are willing to walk the path toward liberation, begin by selecting one of those memories that still resonates within you, like a sad melody that never stops playing. Take a moment to sit in silence, away from the hustle and bustle of the world. Breathe deeply, allowing the fresh air to fill your body and connect you to inner stillness. Now, with each breath, allow your awareness to awaken, as if you were a painter in front of a blank canvas. Relive that memory, but do so from a new perspective, a higher vantage point, from a place where understanding and compassion can flow. Imagine that, instead of reliving that pain as you did in the past, you now have the power to rewrite every word, every gesture, every moment. Change what wasn't said, what was left silent. Change the gestures that caused hurt and replace them with an invisible caress. Feel how the emotions you needed then, like acceptance, comfort, and love, spill into the scene, healing the cracks in your soul. Allow yourself to immerse yourself in the experience of a transformed memory. Recreate it, not only in your mind, but in your heart. Feel how those words you needed to hear are now repeated within you, and how the gestures that sought understanding and support manifest, filling the voids that once hurt you. Make this practice sacred, something constant. For 7 days, dedicate time each day to reliving this memory, but with a difference. Do this with every detail absorbed, with your mind open to transformation. Allow this new version of the memory to take root deeply in your being, until the old story of pain dissolves, and this new narrative becomes your truth, your new reality. As you progress through this practice, observe with awe how consciousness, that divine force within you, can heal old wounds, freeing you from the shadows of the past. Because in the transformation of memory, you not only heal the memory, but you restore the essence of your being. And in that process, the light of truth begins to shine, dissipating everything that no longer serves you. This is the sacred power of memory transformation, the ability to change the course of your life by altering the way you view your experiences. Because by transforming the past, you don't just change yesterday, you also open the doors to a tomorrow filled with possibilities, peace, and liberation. The art of being. In a distant corner of the world, where the mountains meet the sky, there stood a small temple, almost forgotten by the passage of centuries. There, in that sanctuary of silence and reflection, Beatrice arrived. She had walked many paths, searching for answers that always seemed to escape her grasp. She had been a student of life for more years than she could count, always seeking to become something better, someone different. The pursuit of perfection had led her down paths of pain, but also of learning. And yet, something was still missing. Peace, serenity, a deep understanding of what it meant to live in harmony with her own essence. One afternoon, as the sun set, Beatrice knelt before the old master. Her eyes reflected fatigue, not only physical, but also of her soul. She had traveled so many paths, met so many people, read so many books that she no longer knew whether her life was about being or becoming. The teacher, with his calm and profound gaze, told her something so simple that, at first, Beatrice couldn't fully understand it. Do not become, be. It was as if a gust of wind had passed through her being. Beatrice had spent years seeking to transform herself, to perfect herself, to achieve an ideal that always seemed beyond her. But the maestro showed her a different path, to stop striving to be someone else and simply recognize what she already was. What you seek has always been within you, the master said in a soft yet powerful voice. Peace, love, success are not destinations you reach through endless effort. They are states of being, and they already reside within you. You need only accept them. Beatrice remained silent, her thoughts like butterflies fluttering through her mind. For so long, she had believed that life consisted of an endless journey toward something better, toward a perfect version of herself. She had sought the answer outside, in others, in circumstances. But now she understood that the key lay within herself, in accepting what she already was. The universe doesn't respond to your efforts to change. It responds to what you are now, the master continued. If you become, you will always be in the process of becoming. But if you are, the universe reflects you immediately. Beatrice began to understand. There was no longer any need to search, no longer any need to change anything. She just had to be, and everything she had sought would come to her, because it was already a part of her. Julian's story. Julian was a man like many others, caught in the treadmill of life, always chasing something. In his case, he was chasing success. He spent his days striving to reach the top, convinced that happiness lay in the next achievement, the next business deal he closed, the next victory. But when one day he stopped, when he stopped chasing and started living as if he were already at the top, everything changed. He stopped chasing success and began walking like a fulfilled man, like someone who had already achieved everything he'd ever dreamed of. He didn't force anything. He just lived in the certainty that he was already everything he'd ever wanted to be. And, surprisingly, doors opened before him. Opportunities came without him seeking them. People recognized him, without him making any effort to prove anything. At first, he didn't fully understand what was happening. But soon, in a moment of reflection, he realized the truth. When you stop seeking, you stop lacking, and the universe begins to give you what you had already asked for, but without you even realizing it. Sacred practice, the path of being. Now, dear reader, I invite you to walk with me on the path of being. Take a few minutes each day and walk as if you were already the person you most desire to be. It's not a rehearsal. It's not a preparation. It's an act of being. Imagine that you have already achieved everything you long for. Move your body. Breathe as if you were in complete fulfillment. Feel life flowing within you, as if everything you've ever desired were already in your life. Do it for 15 minutes, without rushing, without expectations. Just be yourself, knowing that everything you seek already resides in your heart. There's no need to rush, no need to fight. There's only the present moment, the moment you realize that you already are. Remember, like a flower that doesn't need to make an effort to open, you too open yourself to life naturally, simply by being. Stop becoming and be. The power of being flows from acceptance, from the certainty that everything is already within you. Be still and know that you already are. The Sabbath of Creation. Deep in an ancient forest, where shadows and light danced to the rhythm of the wind, a solitary cabin stood, protected by time. There, Marta, a woman of age filled with wisdom, stood with her granddaughter, who had sought refuge with her grandmother, eager to understand the mysteries of life. Marta, with her wrinkled but firm hands, took the young woman's hand and, in a soft voice, passed on a legacy that had been passed down through generations in her family. Once you plant a seed, you must trust that it will grow. Digging it up every day to see how it develops is like trying to stop the wind. Faith is in waiting, not in constantly watching. In that moment, Marta was not only speaking to him about the earth, but about the deepest principles of life itself. And that lesson, though seemingly simple, carried with it a sacred wisdom, the art of trusting in the invisible, in what has not yet manifested its form. This is how creation works, she explained. The Sabbath of Assumption is not only an act of action, but also of divine rest. When you make a declaration from the heart, when you say what you desire with the conviction that you already possess it, a cosmic shift begins to occur. The universe begins to move in your favor. But then it's essential to step back, allow the energy to flow without resistance, and rest in the certainty that everything is taking its course. Beatriz, the granddaughter, listened intently. For years, she had struggled to understand how to manifest her dreams. She had been working tirelessly, fighting against time, running back and forth without rest, in the mistaken belief that constant effort was the only way forward. But in that moment, she understood that the key lay in a place she had never explored: sacred rest, the pause that allows everything she had worked for to flourish in its divine timing. Ernesto's story. In the nearby town lived Ernesto, a man who had worked his entire life as a merchant. His days were filled with anxiety, his mind always occupied with the next deal, the next client, the next payment. Every morning he counted his coins over and over again, as if the money were the only witness to his efforts. His nights were filled with planning, endless checking of his accounts, until exhaustion became his constant shadow. It was then that a wise old man, with a serene gaze, revealed to him the secret that would change his life. The art of creation lies not in constant effort, but in the rest afterward. The old man told him, "Your work doesn't end with the action. True creation happens when you surrender your desire to the universe and allow it to be fulfilled in its own time." Ernesto, initially distrustful, began to put this wisdom into practice. For each night that passed, he declared his intentions calmly, without rushing, without pressing the pulse of his desire. Then, he trusted and surrendered to the peace of rest, to the Sabbath of the soul, as the wise man called it. He stopped anxiously checking his accounts, stopped planning every minute of the following day. His faith was enough. In that space of stillness, his life began to transform. Businesses that had previously been difficult for him began to flow naturally, and peace, the peace he had been seeking in the noise of the world, finally found its place in his heart. Universal truth: what you resist persists. If you cling to what you've already created, if you continue working after the work is done, you deny the power of what you've begun. By resisting the pause, you don't allow what you've sown to germinate. The universe offers you what you ask for, but you must trust its process, just as you trust nature to make seeds grow. Sacred practice: the declaration in the light of the soul. Now, dear reader, I invite you to also find your own sacred moment. When the sun sets and the stars begin to shine, find a quiet place, your personal sanctuary. Light a candle, not only as a source of light, but as a symbol of the eternal flame that resides within you, the light that guides your dreams. As the flame gently flickers, declare your wishes in a voice calm yet full of certainty. Feel those words come true within your being, how every cell in your body resonates with the truth of what you have said. At that moment, say these words as a divine sealing of your intention. It's done. Then, close your eyes and immerse yourself in silence. Let the candle flame remind you that the universe is already working for you. There is no need for further effort, only the certainty that what you have asked for is on its way. This is your Sabbath, your sacred rest. The time to let go and trust, to allow the seeds you have sown to take deep root. Remember, like stars that shine effortlessly, your being shines when you stop resisting and allow life to unfold at its own pace. Everything you desire is already in the universe, waiting to be acknowledged by you. You just need to rest in the certainty that it is done. Every moment is a threshold. In a small shop hidden among the shadows of the mountains, Elma had found something few beings in the world would know. Among the shelves filled with objects forgotten by the passage of time, a peculiar clock stood in the far corner, covered in a light layer of dust. It had no numbers or dates, and its hands didn't mark hours. They were simply two empty hands moving silently, as if all the time of life had been completely forgotten. Elma, with her curious soul and her heart filled with doubts about the incessant passage of time, watched it fascinated. But she soon realized something extraordinary. The clock's hands only began to move when she stopped chasing the hours and immersed herself completely in the present, in that space where now was the only real thing. Essential truth: the present moment is the only point of power. In that instant, Elma understood that everything she had ever sought, all the answers, all the certainties, were found in that exact moment. The law of assumption didn't work in the future, nor in the past, only in this moment, so fleeting and so eternal at the same time. Time isn't a flowing river, she thought. It's a series of doors that open and close, and true power lies in crossing them with full awareness. The true essence of creation lies in the now. If you decide to embrace a new reality, you must do so in the present, not in the tomorrow that has never arrived, or the yesterday that has already passed. In the breath you take in this moment, in the beat of your heart that resonates now, in the step you take, so simple and yet so momentous. Many, Elma thought, spend their lives swept away by the currents of worry, fear, or guilt, unaware that the only true power they possess lies precisely in this moment, in the here and the now. And by not recognizing this, they continue to waste entire days, wasting their energy on what hasn't happened, on what can no longer be changed. William's story. In the remote village of Santa Clara, there lived a man named Guillermo, a farmer who had dedicated his life to the land. His hands were hardened by work, and his heart was filled with anxiety about what was to come. He was always looking to the horizon, always hoping that the future harvest would bring him the satisfaction he sought. The future was his driving force, his impulse, his reason to keep going. But one day, as he woke up with the sun, something different happened. Instead of running to the fields with his mind filled with thoughts of the coming harvest, William simply stopped. He felt the cold earth beneath his feet, the softness of the wind on his face, the distant birdsong announcing the dawn. For the first time in his life, he allowed himself to be present in that moment, without worries, without anxieties. He breathed deeply, as if taking in the air of life itself. From that moment on, Guillermo began to treat every moment with profound respect, as if each one were a sacred gift. He felt life flow through his fingers as he planted, watched the wind caress the leaves of his crops, and the sun embrace his skin. His crops began to grow more abundantly and healthier than ever. His body, too, grew stronger, as if the very rhythm of nature were healing it. And a quiet joy, the kind found only in the true present, filled his days, transforming his life completely. Universal truth: The moment you stop living in the future is the moment life begins to unfold. The future was no longer his goal. The past no longer held power over him. Only the now existed, and within it, the magic of creation. In this space, Guillermo began to experience a profound peace, as if everything in nature were embracing him, telling him that everything was in its place, that everything was right. Sacred practice, the portal of presence. Now, dear reader, I invite you to try this exercise, which, although simple, has the power to transform your life. Throughout your day, set 5 alarms, one for each part of the day, from morning to night. Every time one of them goes off, stop everything you're doing. No matter how rushed you are, no matter what task awaits you, breathe deeply, feel the air entering your body, connecting you with the here and now. At that moment, he declares with certainty, this is the moment when it becomes reality. Feel deep within you that this moment, this single second, is where all power lies. Not in the future, not in what happened before. Here. Now, everything you've been searching for is in this very moment. Let each alarm be a sacred reminder, a call from the universe to align you with the infinite, to remind you that the power of creation lies not in what tomorrow will do, but in who you are now. Every moment is a portal, and you only need to cross it with awareness for life to unfold before you. Be what you suppose you are. In the dusty streets of a small town, where time seemed to pass slowly and the days were long and peaceful, lived a man named Raphael. He was a simple postal worker, someone who, at first glance, didn't stand out from the crowd. Yet, within him burned a flame that whispered that his destiny was different, one much greater than his daily routine. He knew he was called to lead, even though he didn't fully understand why or how. However, he didn't need to understand everything. He began to walk through his village with the certainty that he was already who he was meant to be. He didn't need proclamations or promises. He didn't want to flaunt titles or wait for others to choose him. He began to walk with an upright posture, a firm gaze, and a voice that, though previously soft, began to resonate with authority. Raphael wasn't acting. This wasn't a charade that could be undone at the end of the day. What he was doing was taking on the form of who he knew he already was. People began to look at him differently. They began to seek him out, to ask his opinion, to approach him for advice, as if he were already their natural leader, as if his very presence instilled security. Even though he hadn't yet been officially elected to any position, they already saw him as their guide, as someone who had been destined to lead them. Essential truth. Assumption is not a temporary mask, but a transformation of being. It's not enough to simply tap into the essence of what you want to be from time to time. It's not enough to adopt an attitude from time to time, to seek that state only in moments of desperation or opportunity. True power lies in assuming that identity as naturally as you put on a piece of clothing. At first, it may seem like an effort, as if you were an actor on a stage. But, little by little, that garment becomes a part of you, your very skin. Like a river that doesn't fight against stones, but flows over them, the process of transformation is natural and gentle. To assume is to become, and to become is to live, without thinking or doubting, until it is no longer a supposition, but a reality. In the end, there will be no distinction between what you imagine yourself to be and what you truly are. Teresa's story. Teresa was a shy woman, a pianist whose talent was undeniable, but whose insecurity dominated her in every performance. Fear invaded her before each concert, like a shadow that settled over her soul. She saw herself as an improviser, as someone who was never completely in control of what she was doing. She often feared that her fingers wouldn't find the right keys, that her music would be less than it could be. But one day, something changed in her heart. She no longer wanted to fight that fear. She silently decided that trust would be her inseparable companion. She didn't wait for it to come on its own, like a blessing she had once believed in. She didn't wait to feel it first. She didn't seek it out in her mind, but embraced it as if it had always been hers. With every breath, with every thought, she immersed herself in the certainty of being capable, of knowing that she didn't need to fight for something that already resided within her. When her fingers touched the keys, there was no struggle. Her music flowed like a river. She was no longer the pianist who feared making mistakes, but a confident pianist, one who didn't seek approval or validation. The confidence she had embraced, without needing to wait to feel secure, had transformed her into the artist she was always destined to be. Sacred practice. The 7 days of the Assumption. Today, I invite you to a practice that can change the direction of your life. Choose an identity you wish to embody, something you've always wanted to be, but haven't yet fully embraced. It could be, I am abundant. I am peaceful. I am a leader. I am wise. Whatever resonates in your heart. For 7 days, live completely from that state. Don't do it only for moments, not even for short bursts. For 7 days, speak with the authority of that identity. Move as if you were already that person. Your thoughts, your words, your actions, everything must align with the truth of who you already are. Don't take breaks. Don't pause. Transformation requires consistency, but it also requires faith. Live with the certainty that you already are what you set out to be, until, in the end, it is no longer a conscious effort, but second nature. When you see the reflection of your new reality, you'll understand that it wasn't a game or an illusion, but a profound and real process of integration. The act of assuming is the act of becoming, and when you assume it with a heart full of certainty, the universe begins to align so that your new identity can manifest. The law works through you. In the deep calm of the early hours, when the night was still slowly fading and the stars seemed to whisper forgotten secrets, Juan, a village mechanic, found himself in his small workshop. His hands, covered in grease and sweat, touched the tools with the familiarity of someone who knew every part, every gear, every spring. However, that morning, something different was happening inside him. As he stood surrounded by engines and parts, something more than the usual mechanics began to awaken in his mind. Images and visions began to flow, not the traditional solutions he had mastered, but innovations that seemed to come from a place beyond his usual knowledge. Brilliant ideas and perfect solutions, like flashes of pure light, danced in his mind. Juan wasn't alone in his workshop. He felt as if a silent presence was guiding him, as if ancient wisdom were being transmitted through him. Understand this, he told himself as the visions continued. The law of supposition moves not through the will to fight, but through harmony with divine intelligence. It was as if the universe were speaking to him in a wordless language, a language only the heart could understand. The law, he thought, was not an external force to be imposed with effort, but a tranquil current that flows through all that is. His role was not to fight the current, but to surrender to it, certain that everything would happen at the perfect moment. Juan didn't question what he saw or the source of those visions, nor did he feel the need to understand how they happened. He simply allowed them to enter, without resistance, and trusted that his hands knew what to do. Effortlessly, without fear, he began to pick up the tools and work, but he wasn't the one guiding them. There was something else operating through his being, a higher intelligence that couldn't be seen, but that he clearly felt within. The law of supposition, John thought, is not a servant we must control. It is a pure, divine force that expresses itself through us. It's not about forcing the course of events, but about aligning ourselves with that invisible current, allowing it to flow through us, and becoming a conduit for its manifestation. In this way, The work that had previously seemed merely the work of a man in his workshop was transformed into a sacred act, a moment of pure creation. It wasn't John's skill that was at stake, but his ability to let himself be guided by the law, to trust that everything he needed was already within him, waiting to be expressed. When one aligns oneself with the law of supposition, one becomes a channel, a vehicle for the divine, and things begin to happen effortlessly. Wisdom doesn't come because one desperately seeks it, but because one allows oneself to be open to it. It's not struggle that leads to success, but calm, trust, and surrender to universal intelligence. In that moment, when Juan allowed himself to be guided, the workshop was filled with a new energy, something that transcended the parts, the tools, and the physical labor. It was the flow of the universe through him, manifesting in the simplest and most beautiful way. In the end, Juan understood that the law of supposition isn't something that can be controlled or manipulated. It's not a tool to be used at will. Rather, it's a divine dance, a whisper from the soul inviting us to enter its flow. All one needs to do is let go, trust its wisdom, and allow life to express itself through one, effortlessly and without resistance. The channel of abundance. In a quiet neighborhood, where the houses lined up like the pieces of a harmonious puzzle, Eudora discovered a profound and simple understanding. Abundance was her natural state. She didn't flaunt this truth or try to convince anyone of its validity. She didn't loudly proclaim her discovery or seek approval from others. She simply lived her life with the serenity of someone who has understood that everything she needs is available at just the right moment. Every day, she woke up with the feeling that the universe provided abundantly for her, and so, her life became a reflection of that truth. Her small but vibrant garden flourished with a variety of flowers that seemed to bloom in perfect synchronization with the seasons. There was no shortage in her home. There was always an empty chair at her table, an extra place for anyone who needed to share a meal or a conversation. Her house became a warm and generous refuge, a space that welcomed not only her, but all those who crossed its threshold. It was a home where abundance was not a distant concept, but a living reality that flowed naturally. What followed was a simple, yet profound miracle. By living in that abundance without effort or ostentation, Eudora began to touch everyone around her. Neighbors, seeing her way of life, began to imitate her. Generosity spread like a gentle breeze touching every home. Shared meals became more frequent, doors were kept open, and solidarity became a daily custom. The spirit of community flourished naturally, as if Eudora had been a channel through which the law of abundance overflowed, touching and blessing everyone in its path. This is the law that now presents itself to you. The law of assumption requires not your effort or your struggle, but your permission. It doesn't ask you to resist or fight circumstances, but rather to surrender to it with faith and openness. It is a divine force, flowing through those who allow its energy to express itself. The manifestation of what you desire doesn't happen because you force it, but because you recognize that you are a channel for the divine to express itself in your life. The morning practice. Every dawn, when the world still holds the mystery of darkness and the light begins to timidly peek out, reverently repeat these words. I am the channel. The law flows through me. I assume, and it is done. Do so with the certainty that you don't need to manipulate or control reality. You simply need to allow the flow of divine abundance and creativity to manifest through you. In that sacred moment of the morning, when the line between the earthly and divine worlds blurs, your declaration is not only an act of faith, but a bridge between universal intention and manifestation on this plane. It is in that space, in the stillness of dawn, that you can feel the law of supposition begin to weave its magic. It is not something you should force or rush, but something that emerges when you surrender to the natural fluidity of the universe. by allowing the law to express itself unhindered, you will see how what seems distant comes closer, how what you desire manifests. Like a flower opening in the garden of your life, without haste and without effort. Remember that the key to everything lies in your surrender. It's not your effort that brings abundance, but your ability to allow it to flow through you, without resistance. Just as a river isn't forced to flow, but simply follows its course, you too are a channel through which divine power can work. And in doing so, your life is transformed into an experience of infinite generosity, touching not only yourself, but all those with whom you share your existence. In a small village nestled among the mountains, Miguel, a man who had preached spiritual truths for many years, encountered a profound revelation on the last morning he stood before his congregation. After having dedicated his life to sharing teachings about the divine, he realized something greater, something that had been waiting to be discovered deep within him. The purest teaching requires no words. That morning, as the rising sun softly illuminated his face, Miguel understood that, above all that had been said, there was something far more powerful. The law of life, the law of assumption, didn't need to be verbalized to manifest itself. Words, however wise, lacked the transformative power that could only come from the purity of action. And it was at that moment, when he understood this, that he ceased to be simply a man of words and became a man of presence. He no longer needed to speak of peace, because he himself was peace. He no longer spoke of love, because he lived it in every gesture he made. He no longer mentioned abundance, because it flowed naturally through his life. And then, he understood that the law doesn't respond to what we say about ourselves, but to who we really are, to what we truly embody in our essence. With that understanding, Michael abandoned the formal garments he had worn for so many years as a symbol of his role. He needed no more clothes, no more words. He was no longer a preacher. He was a living being, embodying the truth he preached. He walked among his people as a transformed man, knowing that his mere presence was enough to change the environment. It was no longer necessary to teach. His very life was an act of teaching. His life example began to speak louder than any sermon. People observed him, but not just with their eyes. They felt him, perceived the truth that emanated from him without a single word. His very existence was an affirmation of what he had understood, that the law of assumption operates not only through what we say, but through what we live, through who we truly are. And so it was that Miguel became a beacon of transformation, a channel through which the law of the universe flowed freely. What he said no longer mattered. What mattered was what he was. The power of the law was evident in every action he took, in every gesture, in every glance, in his silence. The world changed, not because of what Miguel taught with his words, but because of what he taught with his life. And when the people around him began to live from the same place of peace, love, and abundance, they understood that the greatest thing of all is simply to be what you seek in the world, to embody it, to live it. Example: in another corner of the town, Clara, a humble woman who dedicated her life to sewing, also began to live this truth. For years, she had been a submissive person, afraid that her work would not be appreciated enough. She would hunch over her work table, fighting for her efforts to be recognized. But something inside her began to awaken. She no longer wanted to remain the same. One day, she began to sit up straight, moving her hands with a new grace. She was no longer running after others' validation. She, in her heart, knew her own worth. And, as if by magic, others began to see her differently. Clients treated her with respect, without her needing to fight for their recognition. The abundance she had hoped for began to flow to her, not because she sought it, but because she simply began to experience it. Practice of incarnation. Today, I invite you to observe your presence throughout the day, as if it were a reflection of your inner self. Choose one aspect of your body that connects you to your deepest self. Is your posture more upright, like a tree proud of its roots? Is your voice more firm, like a mountain that knows nothing will move it? Is your gait more serene, like a river that flows calmly, knowing its destiny is to reach the sea? Let this reminder accompany you on your journey, so that you never forget that what you are, what you embody, is what truly transforms the world. It's not about what you say, it's about who you are. And when you live in harmony with the law of assumption, the entire universe aligns with you, and manifestation happens effortlessly, without struggle. Because the living word, the true teaching, is not found in words, but in being. The magnetic identity. In a secluded corner of time, where shadows lengthened slowly and the golden light of sunset slipped through dust-covered windows, lived a man named Samuel, a modest watchmaker with a deep and serene soul. His small shop, a quiet refuge amid the bustle of the outside world, was filled with the soft whisper of clocks marking the passage of time. But in that space there was something else, something intangible, an invisible power that transcended the mechanics of clockwork. Those who came to the shop seeking repairs, drawn by the need to bring their watches back to life, found something different. Something inexplicable kept them there, in that small workshop where time was not only repaired, but felt. Samuel never spoke of peace, but peace surrounded him. He didn't need to tell others about the serenity he cultivated, because his very presence emanated that stillness. Every movement of his hand, every gesture as he adjusted a piece, spoke of a master of his art, a man who not only understood the workings of time, but had become its very flow. Soon, people were no longer coming to his shop because they needed their watches repaired, but because of the energy that emanated from Samuel, something that transformed them without him saying a word. People found in his presence something far more powerful than any technical explanation. The serenity of his soul had become a beacon, a magnet that attracted those who unwittingly sought the calm and transformation that only a life lived in deep harmony can bring. Key truth: when you fully embrace the identity you wish to embody, you create a magnetic field that not only attracts others, but transforms them. The law is not based on what you do. It's a matter of who you are. In the purity of your being, the vibrations of your presence resonate with such power that the universe itself aligns to support your truth. Example: a few miles away, in a neighborhood of dusty streets, lived Rosalia, a mother of 3 who spent her days working as a cleaner in a hotel. For years, she had viewed her job as a menial service, one that deserved nothing more than daily toil and little recognition. But one day, as she looked in the employee bathroom mirror, something changed. In that moment, she decided to change the way she saw herself, to transform the image of what she was into the image of what she could be. Staring down at herself, she said to herself, with a resolve that sprang from the depths of her being, "I will no longer be just someone who serves. I will see myself as royalty serving their kingdom." The change was subtle, but irrevocable. From that moment on, Rosalia began to move with quiet dignity. Every step she took was conscious, filled with the authority that only someone who respects themselves can possess. She spoke with authoritative calm, not with the intention of imposing her will, but simply because her presence, at last, reflected the respect she felt for herself. Every task, from cleaning a room to handling a request, she performed with the seriousness and honor of a royal duty. What followed was a visible transformation. Her employers, previously indifferent to her efforts, began to consult her opinion on important decisions. Her children, who had usually been restless and disobedient, changed their behavior, recognizing a new energy in her. Even strangers on the street seemed to sense her change, letting her pass without her having to ask. Something about her bearing, something in her gaze, spoke to them of an inner royalty that could not be ignored. Sacred practice. Today, as you look in the mirror, I invite you to perform an act of profound transformation. Facing your reflection, keep your gaze fixed on yourself, without distractions, and firmly declare, I am your highest identity. Don't speak of it as a distant wish, as something that will come in the future. Do it as a present truth, as something you already are, something you already live. Let this declaration permeate every movement, every word, every action you take during the day. Let your body, your voice, and your presence become the living expression of that truth. It is not an aspiration, but a reality that is already happening. By assuming this identity, you become a magnet that attracts the life you desire. And in that process, the universe, which has always been waiting for your alignment with your true self, begins to respond magnetically, bringing to you everything you've dreamed of, and much more. Because what you do isn't what defines you. What you are is what transforms everything around you. Shedding the skin of the past. In a dusty room, where the walls were covered with yellowed photographs and trophies that had already lost their luster, lived Alejandro, a man once hailed as the Lion of the Desert. His name echoed in stadiums, and his face graced posters and magazine covers. Yet there, in that room filled with memories that no longer served him, he lay motionless, like an old tree waiting for a storm. His hands, hardened by years of struggle, which had once been raised to strike with fury and skill, now held a leather-bound journal, a testament to his transformation. He had come to understand something fundamental, something only silence and reflection can teach. Within you, there are many versions of yourself, she wrote in the journal pages. Each plays its part in the grand theater of your becoming. But there comes a sacred moment when you must let go of what was, to embrace what will be. Alexander realized that the man he had once been, the one known for his strength and victories, was no longer a part of him. That identity that had defined him had served its purpose, and now he must release those memories, those trophies, to make room for something new, something deeper. Firmly and calmly, he gathered his medals, newspaper clippings, and championship belts that had held so much value in his life, but were now just a burden. He took them to his garden, placed them over a small fire, and watched them burn. The metal melted, and the paper turned to ash. And with each spark that ascended to the sky, Alexander felt his soul freed from the shackles of the past. It was then, as if a new version of himself had begun to awaken, that he took up his pen and wrote his first poem. He didn't do it with the intention of becoming a poet. He simply was. The pen was no longer an instrument for claiming external victories, but for exploring the depths of his being. The law of assumption demands that we not only claim a new identity, but that we gracefully release the old one. We must let go of what no longer serves us, to allow the new to enter our being. As Alexander had learned, your energy cannot serve two masters. What you hold in one hand cannot be received with the other. Example: in a nearby village lived Teresa, a woman who, after the death of her husband, had dressed in mourning for 7 long years. Sorrow had enveloped her like a heavy cloak, and each morning she woke up feeling the weight of the past. However, one day, while she was alone in her house, she heard an inner whisper, like a gentle voice emerging from the depths of her soul. Choose life. That afternoon, without any explanation, Teresa decided to release the mourning that had accompanied her all this time. She put away her black veil for the last time, and with calm determination, she dressed in a lavender dress, the color of the flowers that were beginning to bloom in her garden. Looking in the mirror, she saw in her eyes something she had forgotten: hope. What followed was a rebirth. The light that had been obscured for years began to illuminate her life. Teresa didn't need to fully understand the reason for her decision, but something in her heart knew she had left a part of herself behind, to embrace the new woman she was destined to be. Liberation practice. Today, take a quiet space for yourself, where you can connect deeply with your inner self. Take a pen and paper and write a letter to your past self, the self you've been up until now. Thank it for everything it taught you, for the lessons, the struggles, the victories, and the losses. Recognize that without that past, you wouldn't be who you are today, but also understand that now is the time to let it go. When you're finished, perform a sacred ritual. Burn the letter or bury it in the ground, symbolizing your liberation. Let the fire consume the words and the earth receive them, freeing you from everything that no longer serves you. Remember, the future can only enter your life when you let go of what no longer belongs to you. Like a tree shedding its leaves in the wind, you must shed the skin of the past so that new growth can flourish. The invisible dance of reality. In an ancient market, where the colors of the fabrics danced in the wind and the aromas of spices mingled in an intoxicating perfume, lived Elijah, a merchant of treasures brought from distant lands. Day after day, he raised his voice above the hustle and bustle, enthusiastically announcing his wares, as if each word were a net cast into the sea, hoping to catch some inattentive customer. However, despite his efforts, his earnings were meager and his heart restless. One afternoon, while observing the other merchants, he noticed something he had never noticed before. In a corner, under the shade of an old tree, an elderly weaver worked silently. He didn't shout. He didn't call attention to himself. He didn't beg for customers. And yet, people flocked to him as if drawn by an invisible force. Intrigued, Elias approached. "Master, how is it possible that everyone comes to you without you calling them?" he asked. The old man smiled with the serenity of someone who has understood the secrets of the universe. "Truth needs no herald," he said in a gentle voice. "When something is authentic, its presence is enough to attract what belongs to it." Elijah remained silent. That night, as he walked under the starry sky, he reflected on those words. Was it possible that his desperation to sell was keeping him from what he was looking for? The next morning, he decided to change his approach. Instead of shouting, he simply showed up. He arranged his wares with care, touched each item with gratitude, and allowed himself to breathe calmly. He no longer needed to convince anyone of his value. He simply accepted it. At first, she was afraid. What if no one came? But soon, something unexpected happened. People began to stop, drawn by the harmony of her space, the serenity of her posture, the energy of her silent certainty. Sacred lesson. The universe doesn't respond to noise, but to vibration. When we stop begging and start assuming, when we stop commanding and simply know, reality aligns with our certainty. Example: Camilla, a young teacher with a soft voice, used to feel like her students only listened to her when she raised her voice. One day, instead of fighting the classroom noise, she decided to change her approach. Before starting the class, he closed his eyes and thought, "I am a channel of wisdom and light. My presence inspires respect and learning." He didn't try to impose himself. He didn't demand silence. He simply waited, with unwavering calm. One by one, the students fell silent, as if an invisible force enveloped them. From that day on, he discovered that true authority lay not in imposition, but in inner security. The art of living from within Ariadne never needed to raise her voice to be heard. She didn't demand respect. She didn't beg for recognition. Her presence, like the murmur of a river in the stillness of early morning, had the power of something that doesn't need to impose itself. Her classroom at first was a whirlwind of laughter and distractions, a space where the noise seemed louder than the teaching. But she didn't combat the chaos with rigidity or impose silence with commands. Instead, she embraced her influence with the naturalness with which the moon assumes the tide will respond to its call. And little by little, without visible effort, the transformation occurred. The children began to lean forward to hear his gentle words. His tone never changed, but his certainty did. Each sentence he spoke held the root of a profound truth. The classroom, which had once been a turbulent sea, became a calm lake where knowledge could be clearly reflected. The sacred truth. It is not external force that shapes the world, but the inner conviction with which we live. Words have power not because of their volume, but because of the certainty with which they are spoken. A whisper, when born of absolute knowledge, can move mountains. The universe does not respond to cries of despair, but to the silent trust of those who have already received what they desire. Example: Luciano, a musician who had spent years playing in noisy cafes, always struggled to capture his audience's attention. He raised the pitch of his guitar, strained his voice, and feared being ignored. But one day, he decided to do the opposite. He sat on the stage, closed his eyes, and began to play, not for others, but for himself, as if each note were a conversation with something larger than himself. And then, the magic happened. One by one, the murmurs ceased. The cutlery stopped clinking against the plates. Even the air seemed to become denser, more sacred. He hadn't demanded to be heard, but his certainty made it inevitable. Sacred practice. The declaration of dawn and dusk. At dawn, choose a truth you wish to manifest, not as a wish, but as an undeniable reality. Declare it out loud, calmly, with the authority of someone who knows that the sun doesn't need permission to rise. Let each word resonate within you, like an echo that never fades away. At dusk, repeat it, while the sky turns violet. Between these two sacred moments, let it go. Don't chase it. Don't question it. Trust that the law of assumption is already at work. When the miracle is already reality. The scorching sun devoured the earth, leaving scars on the fields where wheat fields once danced. The drought spread like a blanket of hopelessness, and the farmers, resigned, abandoned their lands one by one. All but one. Elias, his skin tanned by years of working under the open sky, went out each morning with his tools. To the astonishment of his neighbors, he continued preparing the land, turning over the hardened soil, cleaning the irrigation canals, as if rain were already on the way. "Why do you keep working in dead fields?" they asked him. "Can't you see the sky is still empty?" Elias just smiled and continued. He had discovered an ancient secret. Nature does not respond to what the eyes see, but to what the heart knows with certainty. He didn't ask for rain. He didn't beg for it. He simply lived as if it were already on the way. And one night, when the dust seemed to have overcome the world, the wind shifted. The clouds gathered in a silent pact, and at dawn, the first drop kissed the earth. Then another, and another. When the water finally fell in full, his field was ready to receive it. The law of miracles. What we call a miracle is nothing more than the natural response to an unshakable conviction. It is not a favor of fate, but the echo of absolute faith. Example: the story of Magdalena. In a nursing home, where the days seemed to repeat themselves with the monotony of a broken clock, Magdalena lay in her bed, listening to the doctor's diagnosis. "You'll never walk again." But while they were talking about limitations, she already saw herself standing. Every morning she closed her eyes and felt the ground beneath her feet, her muscles, her skin, her balance. Everything inside her moved, even though her body remained motionless on the outside. At first, nothing changed, but the certainty within her grew until her body had no choice but to obey. Weeks later, her fingers responded. Then, her legs. One day, she stood up, and soon after, she was walking the halls with the grace of someone who always knew a miracle wasn't a possibility, but a certainty. Sacred practice. The Miracle Manifesto. Sit quietly and choose a wish you once thought impossible. On a blank sheet of paper, write your Miracle Manifesto in the present tense. It's done. Now I walk in the reality where your wish. Don't question it. Don't look at it with doubt. Write with the certainty of someone recounting a memory. Let your words be not just an affirmation, but a testimony of the inevitable. The journey back to you. For years, Samuel traveled dusty roads, crossed oceans, and searched in distant temples for the answer to his own existence. He believed the truth lay in the words of the wise, in hidden scriptures, in sacred mountains that whispered secrets to the wind. But one afternoon, exhausted, he looked at his reflection in a calm river. In the brightness of his own eyes, he heard a serene voice. It was his. He had spent his life searching outside for what was always inside. Key truth: the power you crave has never left you. It moves in your every thought, resonates in your words, and vibrates in your very being. Mariana, another seeker, had clung to maps and books, trying to unravel the mystery of her purpose. But when exhaustion forced her to stop in her own garden, she felt a revelation. There was nothing to find. There was only remembering to do. Sacred practice, the card of inner power. Take paper and ink. Allow your soul to speak without restriction. Write a letter from your higher self to your present self. Don't think, don't doubt. Just let the wisdom that has always been within you flow. And when you're done, sign it with love. Keep it, not as a forgotten scroll, but as a testament to your eternal truth. Chapter 30. The Light. You now shine. Every dawn, Abel climbed the steps of the old lighthouse. His steps were firm, his hands steady as he lit the flame that guided the ships through the mist. That morning, his young apprentice Daniel followed him silently, watching as the lighthouse keeper carried out his work without hesitation. "Why do you turn on the light even though the sea looks calm?" the boy asked. Abel smiled. "Because even when you don't see it, there's always someone in the darkness looking for a beacon." Sacred symbol. The light that guides the ships is like the truth you carry within. Your certainty illuminates more than you imagine. In a small town, Elisa, a seamstress, discovered that changing her internal dialogue had transformed her life. Without realizing it, she inspired others. The fisherman's wife began to embrace abundance. The baker, who had always seen himself as a simple worker, began to walk with the dignity of a master. The small community stopped begging for change and began to live it, because the certainty of one is enough to awaken faith in many. Final practice: share your truth. Remember a time when the law of assumption worked on you. Choose someone who is ready to listen and tell them, not as a lesson, but as a living testimony. Because wisdom is not imposed, it is transmitted. Conclusion: the sacred key. This book can end here, but your real work has just begun. Because now you know you haven't learned anything new. You've only remembered what your soul always knew. Every morning is a canvas. Every encounter, an opportunity. Every challenge, an invitation to demonstrate your power. And as you breathe, remember, you are the creator of your destiny. The power has always been within you.